It's not often that you can walk along Broadway in July and stumble upon a story worth telling. Usually, the city doesn't offer much drama during that month, but just a few sweltering, unbearable days ago, I found one, and it seems to settle an important question about art. The city was practically empty, except for Hollis, me, and maybe 2 or 3 million sun worshippers stuck at their desks or counters. Everyone else, the lucky ones, had escaped to beaches, lakes, and mountains. They had already started asking for more money to keep enjoying their vacations. Every evening, Hollis and I wandered around the deserted city, looking for cool spots. We tried empty cafes, quiet dining rooms, and rooftop gardens. We even knew the exact speed of every electric fan in the city and made sure to follow the fastest ones wherever they were. Hollis's fiancée, Miss Laura Sherman, had been up in the Adirondack Mountains at Lower Saranac Lake for a month. In another week, Hollis was going to join her there. In the meantime, he complained about the heat and the city in a good-natured way and spent time with me. I didn't mind, because he always showed me her photograph over coffee after dinner. As payback, I made him listen to my one-act play. One particularly unbearable evening, the heat of the day seemed to be bouncing back from every brick, stone, and piece of metal in the city. But we were clever enough to find a cool, quiet spot. We sat on chairs on a polished oak floor, surrounded by the white tablecloths of 50 empty tables flapping in the artificial breeze like seagulls. A waiter was lingering far away, ready to respond to the slightest signal. It was so empty that we could have sung songs or even had a duel without anyone disturbing us. As usual, Hollis took out Loris's photo when the coffee arrived. I praised her again, pointing out her graceful neck, the elegant way her hair was tied back, and her eyes, which seemed to follow you, like in a painting. "She's amazing," Hollis said with excitement. "As dependable as Great Northern preferred stock, and has a personality that's as precise as a Swiss watch. Just one more week, and I'll be the happiest guy ever." My old college friend Tom Tolliver went up to see her a couple of weeks ago. He wrote to me and said Loris talks about me all the time. It's like I hit the jackpot. Yes, I said quickly, eager to change the subject. I pulled out my typed play. "She sounds wonderful. Now, let's focus on this little play I wrote. You promised to listen to it. Has it been performed before?" Hollis asked. "Not exactly," I admitted. "I read half of it the other day to a guy whose brother knows Robert Edison, but he had to catch a train before I could finish." "All right, go ahead," Hollis said, leaning back in his chair like a good sport. "I'm no expert, but I'll give you my honest opinion from the perspective of someone who sits in the first row balcony. I'm a big theater fan, and I can usually spot a bad play as fast as anyone in the cheap seats. Call the waiter over again, and then start reading. I'm all ears. I read my little play with care, putting in as much feeling as I could. I may have even been a bit dramatic. There was one scene I was particularly proud of. The comedy quickly turns into intense drama. In this scene, Captain Marchmont realizes that his wife is a deceitful woman who has been lying to him since the day they met. From that moment, the two of them engage in a fierce and emotional battle, she with her charm and clever lies, trying to win him back, and he, heartbroken and full of anger, trying to push her out of his heart. I always thought this scene was a masterpiece. In the big moment, Captain Marchmont discovers her lies by reading the imprint of a note she wrote to the Count on a blotter, reflected in a mirror. He raises his hand to the heavens and cries out, "Oh God, who created woman while Adam slept and gave her to him as a companion? Take back your gift and return instead the sleep, even if it lasts forever." "Rubbish," said Hollis rudely after I delivered the line with great emphasis. "Excuse me?" I said, trying to stay calm. "Come on," Hollis replied. "Don't be ridiculous. Nobody talks like that these days. The play was fine until you brought in all that over-the-top nonsense. Get rid of the dramatic gestures and that Adam and Eve stuff. Make your captain talk the way you, I, or Bill Jones would." "I'll admit," I said seriously, since this touched on something I deeply believed, that in everyday life, people use simple language. Up until the moment when the captain makes his discovery, all the characters in the play speak pretty much the way people do in real life. But I think it's perfectly reasonable for him to use dramatic language in such a powerful and tragic situation. "Tragic, my foot," said Hollis, dismissing me. "In Shakespeare's time, maybe he could have gotten away with spouting that kind of highfalutin nonsense. Back then, people ordered breakfast in poetic verse and fired their cooks with long speeches. But not here, not on Broadway, and definitely not in 1905. I believe," I said, "that when people experience intense emotions, their usual way of speaking changes. In moments of sudden grief, loss, or disappointment, even ordinary people might use words that are as powerful and dramatic as the ones in stories or plays." "That's where you're wrong," said Hollis. "It's plain, everyday talk that works. Your captain would probably just kick a chair, light a cigar, make a drink, and call his lawyer instead of delivering those Shakespearean fireworks." Maybe later, I agreed, but in the exact moment when the realization hits him, right when he feels the full weight of it, I believe something deep and powerful would naturally come out of him, even if he usually talks like a regular guy. If I'm wrong about that, then so be it. "Sure," said Hollis kindly, You've got to make things a bit more dramatic for the stage. Audiences expect it. When the villain kidnaps little Effie, her mother has to scream, "My child, my child," and act like she's tearing the world apart. But in real life, she'd probably call the police, make some tea, and get a photo of her daughter ready for the reporters. Same with your villain. On stage, he clutches his head and shouts, "All is lost!" But off stage, he'd probably just say, "This is a setup. Talk to my lawyers." "I'm not comforted," I said gloomily. I wanted my play to reflect real life. If people face big crises in an ordinary way, then maybe that's how they should act on stage too. And then, like two lazy fish drifting out of a cool pond, Hollis and I left the comfort of the Grand Hotel and wandered along the lively Broadway. The question about dramatic art remained unresolved. We drifted through the excitement of the city, like fish nibbling at shiny bait, but avoiding the hooks. As smart fish do, but the summer heat of Manhattan soon drained our energy. Hollis's apartment, 9 stories up and facing south, offered a cooler escape. It wasn't long before we stepped into the elevator, heading for that peaceful haven. I was a regular guest at Hollis's place, so I quickly forgot about my play. Instead, I found myself at the sideboard, surrounded by cracked ice, glasses, and bottles, mixing drinks. A breeze from the bay blew in through the windows, not entirely ruined by the heat of the asphalt it had passed over. Hollis was whistling softly as he flipped through a few letters that had arrived recently. He pulled over the coolest wicker armchairs for us to relax in. I was carefully pouring vermouth when I heard a voice. It was hoarse and dramatic, groaning. "False, oh God, false, and love is a lie, and friendship is nothing but the talk of devils." Startled, I turned around quickly. Hollis was lying across the table, his head resting on his outstretched arms. Then he lifted his head and laughed in his usual way. I understood immediately. He was mocking my theory about dramatic language. The sudden, over-the-top words in the middle of our casual evening felt so unnatural that, for a moment, I started to doubt myself. Maybe my theory was wrong. Hollis sat up slowly, his expression serious now. "You were right about that dramatic stuff, old friend," he said quietly, tossing a letter toward me. I picked it up and read it. Loris had run away with Tom Tolliver.